Okay, let's talk about this recently released preprint about vaccine effectiveness in children in New York. This is a preprint out of the New York Public Health Department in coordination with State University of New York. It's looking at Pfizer vaccination amongst children 5 through 11 and 12 through 17. They looked at this data during December 21st through January 22nd. That's during the Omicron emergence. And what they did is they looked at new laboratory confirmed COVID-19 cases and hospitalization. So they're looking at cases that were laboratory confirmed. They don't talk about symptomatic or asymptomatic. They just know that they tested positive. The testing data, I would say, and the transmission data is not very good in these retrospective studies because there's a lot of different things that lead into whether kids get tested or not. You know, they may just be testing for like sporting events that they need to go to or school. There's different people just might be testing just for fun or just to see if their kids have it. They might be testing before they go visit grandma. For whatever reason, there may be a lot of testing. Many of these may be asymptomatic. So I think that data is a little bit hard to interpret because it's not uniform testing. So it's not like it during a clinical trial when people are being tested when they're symptomatic. So it's either symptomatic or asymptomatic testing. We don't know. However, hospitalization, there is no real bias. I mean, if your kid is sick, you're getting hospitalized. The only caveat is, are they being hospitalized for COVID or are they being hospitalized for something else and they just happen to have COVID? So the question is, are they being hospitalized with COVID or they being hospitalized for COVID? That's kind of a difference. I think from the wording of the paper, it looks like they're saying that it's hospitalization for COVID. And the data seems to bear that out a little bit, although you can't tell 100%. Okay, so here are the results. From December to January 13th through January 30th, amongst 850 fully vaccinated children 12 to 17, and 365,000 children 5 to 11, vaccine efficacy declined from 66%. So the vaccine was 66% efficient, and from 68%, so from 66 to 51 in the 12 to 17 year group, and from 68 to 12%. So 12% is basically not effective. If you're protecting only, if it's only 12% effective, that's essentially not an effective vaccine. And then vaccine efficiency against hospitalization changed from 85 to 73 for the older children and from 100 to 47 for the younger children. However, these, you'll see when we look at the raw data, the numbers are so low, you see that the 95% confidence interval are huge. Goes from negative 189% to 100%. And this one goes from negative 12% to 75%. So you can't really interpret this data. There is no statistical confidence in these numbers. Okay, but the thing is, I just wanted to get into the raw numbers of this thing. Okay, so results. By the end of January 30th, 365 children that were vaccinated, 365,000 children. And based on their census data, they figured that's about 23% of children. So what does that mean? That means the number of children that were not vaccinated, let's see, that's like 365 divided by 0.23. Okay, so that means there was 1.6 million children total, I believe. Let me see if I'm doing that math correctly. Yeah, so that's 1.6 million children total. So the number of unvaccinated children is minus 365. That's about 1.2 million. Okay, so let's remember that, 1.2 million. we'll just look at the children, the young children, because that's what I want to focus on. So there were 365,000 children, roughly. These are all very rough back of the envelope calculations. So 365,000 children were vaccinated, and about 1.2 are unvaccinated. Okay, so I want to look at the. I thought I saw the table. Should be a table someplace here. Okay, here we go. View inline. Okay, yeah, so this is what we want to look at. So remember, cases are highly variable based on testing, so I think that is not very useful information. I'm just going to skip that totally. Now, hospitalizations, you can't really, there's no real bias. Your kids are either getting hospitalized or they're not. So you can see here that the number of events is very low. So in the vaccinated kids, very, very low. You had 0 in this week, 2 in this week, 3 in this week, 5 in this week, 6, then 8 and 8. And in the unvaccinated kids, it's 18, 50, 80, 78, 68, 46, and 42. Now, it is unclear how many of these were just hospitalized with COVID or hospitalized because of COVID. That would be a very important thing, and it's not very clear in this paper which it is. However, let's give the benefit of the doubt and say that these were kids that were hospitalized with COVID. They were hospitalized because they got COVID and they got really sick from COVID, and that's why they're in the hospital. All right, so let's look at the percentage of the kids that were vaccinated that got unvaccinated that got hospitalized. So remember, there's 1.2 million kids that are unvaccinated. Out of those 1.2 million, in this time span, let's see, let's just do a rough estimate. This is about 100. So it looks like it's about 50 or 60. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 times about 60, that's about 400. About 400 kids. So 400 kids were hospitalized in this period. So let's do the math. 400 divided by 1.2 million. All right, that is 0.0003, okay? 0.0, so 3 zeros and 0.3 zeros and then a 3. So that's the percentage that were hospitalized in the unvaccinated. Or actually, that's the decimal. So in the percentage, it's 0.03. Am I right? Yep, 0.03. So let's see, times 100 to make it a percent. Yep, 0.03. Okay, so that's the percentage of kids that were hospitalized amongst the unvaccinated kids, 0.03. All right, so now let's figure it out for the vaccinated kids, of which there's 365,000. So this is roughly, let's see, 8 plus that's 10. This is about 10, and this is about 10, so about 30. So 30 divided by 3. And remember, these are just really rough, very rough things. So then times 100. Okay, so that's 0.008, okay? And so then there's a concept called number needed to treat, okay? So in the control group, the incidence was 0.03%. And the experiment group, it was 0.008. So this is the adverse outcome that you want to prevent. You want to prevent kids from going to the hospital. And then when you treated them, the percentage that went to the hospital was 0.008. So that's better. They did better. And then in the control group, if you didn't give them the vaccine, this is the percentage that got into the hospital. Then if you calculate this, all right, so this is the number needed to treat. So you would have to treat about 5,000 kids to prevent one kid from going into the hospital. So then you have to decide whether that makes sense. And from a public health standpoint, that's why they're recommending it. They're saying that we will vaccinate 4,500 kids to prevent one kid from being admitted to the hospital. Now, the flip side is what if, like these vaccinated kids and these like, what if these were not symptomatic? Maybe they were in there for some like tonsillectomy, for some elective surgery, or they were constipated, or whatever. They were in the hospital for many other reasons, but they all get tested for COVID, and these just happen to have more COVID than unvaccinated because, obviously they're going to get it more often. But kids do very well, and we know that pediatric deaths are essentially non-existent. So there is no mortality data. And so we don't know what this is. But best case scenario for people that want to vaccinate, it is the number needed to treat is about 5,000. 5,000. You have to vaccinate 5,000 kids to prevent one kid from being admitted to the hospital for COVID, which is could make sense depending on how you look at it. But if you look at it over the vaccine efficiency, it went down significantly towards the end, and you see that the vaccine efficiency here for infections is like 12%, and for hospitalizations is like 48%. So it's not great. So anyway, I've always held the belief personally that vaccinating young kids that do well with COVID, I don't know that there's a strong case for that. For vaccinating older people and people that are susceptible, I think there's a very strong case for that. For people that do well, early on there was a case for it if you could get herd immunity and eradicate the disease and protect the population by getting everyone vaccinated. I think that's no longer the case unless we plan on vaccinating deer and other wildlife carriers as well. So we're not going to eradicate the disease. And at this point, my personal feeling is that, given data that continues to come out like this, that vaccinating healthy young kids is probably not, maybe not the best way to go. It might be sort of unnecessary, but everyone has to make their own decision. This is the number needed to treat. It does help prevent kids from being hospitalized, whether it be with COVID or for COVID is unclear based on the data now, but there is a significant difference between these two numbers if you look at it. All right. Well, thanks for watching. I will link this paper in the description below if you want to look at it yourself.